All right, so let's go ahead and lay out a scenario that might happen to you in your project and something we want to build against, especially as it relates to this particular detail view. So jumping back in the admin, I'm going to go to a TV show. In my case, it's The Office, and this one has a number of seasons, at least 3 of them published. And what I'm going to do is create season 11, and I'm just going to go nuts and call it season, 1. Right, so I made a spelling error here, but I'm going to go ahead and publish it out, hit save, and then I'm now going to go into season 1 and go, whoa, where did season 1 go? Right, so this should actually exist. It should be inside of my seasons. So going back into the TV show itself, let's just ensure that we are iterating through our seasons and we have those displayed if you don't already. So inside of the TV show detail, we're going to go ahead and do for season in object.seasons, and we should be able to see each season in here. So in for, and then season and dot title and season dot slug. Okay, and then we'll give it a list element here. So if there's multiple, we'll see them separated a little bit better. Okay, cool. So here we go. We've got season 1 and season 1 twice, but I actually intended for that to be season 11. We can see that by doing season.order. We can see what the order is for each one of these things as it shows. So this should be season 11, but I made that mistake. Now there would be a lot of different ways on how we could catch this, but this is how it pertains to the actual view itself. So what we actually want to do in this get object call is we don't want to filter down a query set. Instead, what we want to do is use the get method. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out the get query set part. And now what I'm going to do is return object equals to TV show season proxy. And it's actually going to filter a lot of the same things. So the first one being the slug, or I should do .objects.get. First one being that slug, second one being this slug. Okay, so there are other things that I do need to have in here, which is like state and publish timestamp. So both of those fields I do need. So publish timestamp is less than or equal to now. So let's do that one first. Do from Django.utils. We're going to go and import the time zone. Okay. So we'll go ahead and do object equals to timezone.now, and oops, not object, but rather now equals to timezone.now. There we go. State, if you remember, was a reusable field. So if we scroll to the top of models.py, we've got our publish state options here. So let's bring that in. And we'll come back down, and state being publish state options.publish. And then I'm going to return this object. Okay, so we save that, and let's go into season 1, and we get this error, multiple objects returned. It returned 2. Well, of course it returned 2. But the reason we want to do this is what this is going to do, or kind of require us to do, is to ask for forgiveness, right? So we grab it, we just grab it, and then if it fails, we ask for forgiveness. What we did here was we asked for permission first, and then kind of had some default fallbacks. Now, the get object, the actual lookup, this lookup is going to be more efficient than the query set itself, because we're basically getting a big list and then cutting that list down, where this is just looking for a matching object of some kind. So when I say that we are going to ask for forgiveness, what that means is I'm going to put this into a try block. This is very common in Python, is to use try blocks to catch exceptions. So the exception itself was called multiple objects returned. That's what showed up on that template. Now we actually use either the model or the proxy model to use TV show dot whatever that proxy model is, and then now I've got object is none, and then I might want to log this. So log this, and then I can also run an exception saying object is none as well. So now that I've got this, I can refresh in here, and I've got nothing actually showing up. So it's giving me done. Okay, so that's actually probably not what I want. I probably do want to raise a 404 error if there is none, like that final exception, maybe I want to have a 404 error on there somewhere, right? Instead of none, because if I leave it in as obj is none, literally anything that doesn't match a lookup is just going to give me this empty page here. So we do probably want to call raise HTTP 404. And so what this is doing, though, is it's telling me that in my database, I have multiple objects that match this get lookup. That's literally what it's telling me. So that means then I can actually filter this down by that. So I could literally use that same lookup and say QS equals to that. And then instead of get, we use .filter. And now I can use, QS.first based off of that. So that would actually return back whatever that object is now. And if I refresh in, let's say, season 1, or season-1 rather, I can see that it's actually giving me that first object, whatever that object might end up being, which is overall fine. And of course, I actually don't need to use this entire filter. I can use the filter that I'm familiar with, which is just .publish, and we can call it just like that. Now, you might also put a lot of these things into a model manager itself, but I'm going to leave it in here because the actual, hey, this multiple object is not found is inside of this view. So I might want to have other additional features to this, like actually reporting what the request would be. So self.request, whatever that might be, and the IP address that's going for it, and all those other things that you might want to have inside of your log. But for this actually should work okay for me for now. But the problem is this raises another concern, and that is, well, how do I actually prevent this from happening in the first place, right? So that's where our actual Slugify function should probably change, at least slightly, if not majorly, or if at least for just the TV show, because that one is pretty much the only one that's going to need those two slugs to be unique at this point, or at least unique together. So there's a number of ways on how we can go about thinking about this. So let's go ahead and do that soon. But the general idea is now we have a better TV show season detail lookup, and we're able to grab these things just in a little bit more of a robust way. Now, of course, with all this is said, you can still call this and then, or this should actually say published, You should still call this and still log it. Like, you don't necessarily have to have this get call here, but this will definitely be a more efficient lookup in the long run for the vast majority of your TV show lookups, right? But of course, it still gives us the error of the fact that now we can't even see season 11 because I messed up on the slug. And thus another downside to using slugs as the URLs, because you might forget that. So perhaps you do want to just change this whole thing to simply just being an ID field. So we would come in here and say int, and this being an ID field for that particular season. This slug then wouldn't really matter, right? It would go based off of the ID, and how we set this up is they're all just playlists. You would have to add additional verification, or, well, it should be able to use it based off of the TV show proxy and the query set that we're setting up. Let's actually try that one out. I'm going to go ahead and try it. So let's comment out this object for just a moment and take a look at what it would be if it was just that ID. So TV show detail, let's go ahead and do season.id. Okay, so let's go into that detail. And there we go. So we've got an ID here. Come in, hit enter. It's giving me a not found. Okay, so there are probably additional things that I'll have to do to ensure that that URL works. I thought maybe we would get away with just saving it as is. Oh, there we go. So I saved it again. Oh yeah, so we don't want to call it int of ID like we discussed in the last one, but rather PK. And now I save it, and there we go. So now it's actually showing me season 1, and then we can go into the season 11 one, and there we go. That's actually a different version, right? Now, if we actually try to use a movie, right? So the movie was 14, I believe, is what we saw. So that one gives me a failure, where if I go into media 14, it does not. So this is where actually designing your URLs, well, it can be really easy if we just use the primary keys, or it can take some additional effort to get it right, or you could use some sort of combination. This URL pattern is completely ignoring this slug right here. It doesn't care about it at all. It's just going off of this ID. And then the cool thing about using those proxies is they actually circumvent the other IDs for just the general playlist, however, still keeping all of that same structure. But I'm actually going to go ahead and keep this here. I just wanted to mention all of these different ways on how we could solve that error. I want to keep that there just because we want to actually solve this slug issue. It still is an issue, so we don't want to just ignore it. So let's go ahead and solve that